Today, we talk some of the most exciting prospects in this draft. Odunze, Brock Bowers, Drake Maye, and JJ McCarthy. We're going to talk trades that have happened in real league. We're going to talk historical value of players taken in this range. We're going to talk strategy of what you should do with these players, whether or not you've already drafted or you're holding these players at this point. So make sure to stick around for all of that. And welcome into the Data Construction Podcast. I'm your host, Justin. Joining me today, just David. Not just David, like he's not good enough, but just JP is not here today. David is going to carry me through this show. Today, we are excited to bring to you a little video breaking down this tier of players that we've identified from around pick 105 to 108, JJ McCarthy and Drake Maye as quarterback, Brock Bowers and Odunze. Right now, we have a tier of players from 101 to 104. We've got those guys. We got Caleb Daniels in there. We have Malik Neighbors and Marvin Harrison Jr. Then we have these other guys here that we're talking about today. We want to talk about whether these players, these four kind of a little bit, every time I see a rookie draft on the clock, people are hesitant at these picks. People are trying to trade down a little bit, tearing off of these players potentially, seeing if they can get something, but not a whole lot of deals get done. So there's a lot of kind of confusion on what to do with these guys. So we want to first open up by discussing, are these guys, these four players, closer to the elite 101 to 104 tier, or are JJ, Drake Maye, Bowers, and Odunze closer to like that 109, 110 tier? So David, I'm going to throw it to you.
I think for me, not a lot has changed since the draft. Odunze and Maye went basically where we thought. JJ went where we thought. Brock Bowers maybe is not the best year one spot, but long term, I still like where he landed. When we're talking elite players, I'm always going to bet on talent over situation. I think situation comes into play when you're not talking about these elite players that we are here. But I think it's still a top 8 very clearly. A lot less willing to move back than I am up in that range. So I would say they're closer to 103, 104.
And just one point, we are talking the 1.75 tight end premium, just as our standard kind of thought process. Later on in the episode, we will discuss in non-tight end premium formats as well. For me, I think this is a difficult question because the talent of these players, I think, is definitely exponentially, and then the value of the draft capital, I think, is more important for these players than those like 109, 110 players. I do wonder like how well a few of these guys are going to be able to produce year one. I have a little bit of concern about the way that Maye can produce. JJ, I think he can potentially produce that offense. We don't know if he's going to be starting week one. There's speculation from beat reporters. Darnold's going to be there for a little bit. Might be hard for him to crack the lineup before bye weeks, etc. Rome, I mean, goodness gracious, that wide receiver room. Chat GPT, I hear, did predict all three will have 1,000 receiving yards, though. So there's that, put it in the books. And then you mentioned Bowers' landing spot. So do you consider this more of an issue potentially if you are a competing team and you're in this range, you lucked into getting one of those picks? Are you more interested in trying to potentially pivot with that pick then?
Maybe not more interested because if I'm competing, I'm always looking to pivot to known production from my rookie picks. I do like the class. I like drafting. I enjoy all this process. But if I'm competing, I want to know what I have on my roster. I want to know what to expect. I might have been okay with Odunze in a different spot or something like that. Maybe one of these quarterbacks are your quarterback 2 and you've got a strong quarterback 3, or maybe they're interchangeable. But yeah, I think I'm still looking to pivot off if I'm competing, but that's not really different from before we found out landing spots.
Yeah, and speaking about pivoting off of players, we're going to go ahead and we're going to bring to all of you some pivot information. And so we're going to do that in the form. We're going to start with our quarterbacks here first. We're going to bring to you the Keep Trade Cut rankings. I have them on the screen here on YouTube. Right now at quarterback, we have Lawrence at QB 13, Purdy QB 14, Drake Maye QB 15, Tua QB 16, Dak QB 17, JJ QB 18, Goff QB 19, Bryce Young at QB 20, and I just added an extra one, Bo Nix QB 21, just to put a little perspective there of where these rookies are slotting into veterans. Comparing this to sleeper ADP, it's very similar. I'm not going to name all the names off. We have it on the screen here on YouTube. But the one point I will say that I find interesting, JJ and May are both one spot higher in sleeper ADP than keep trade cut ranks. So, and it's a small sample size, but also the reactions on keep trade cut are a small sample size. So the reactions in drafts have actually been starker than the reactions in keep trade cut, which is kind of interesting because usually we think keep trade cut overreacts. But what is your immediate reaction to this information as far as when you look at the players JJ is in the range of? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it makes sense. Like 14 through 18 or 19, kind of the same tier. You can kind of arrange them however you want. If you're competing, like we were just talking about, you probably want to try to pivot to maybe Dak or two or Goff somewhere in there. If I did my own rankings, I haven't caught up on them yet, but if I did, I'm sure this group would be pretty close together. It'd probably be the same group, honestly.
Yeah, this is a group that you almost have to tier competing versus not competing. Honestly, when I was going through my process, I had like a Charlie from It's Always Sunny flow chart: competing, not competing, semi-competing. League doesn't trade a lot. Like, how do I not think it is 100% different? And I think the picture with May is pretty similar. I think we all like his rushing upside, right? Heard people throw out the terms prospect fatigue with him. And I think that's honestly a little bit valid because 3, 4 months ago, not much has changed for him since then. His production profile hasn't changed. He didn't do anything that showed he's like less deserving. He got top 3 draft capital. He has that build and that potential to become that Josh Allen type. He is very young. He didn't have a great season last year, but he was throwing to the type of weapons Bryce Young was throwing to last year in Carolina, more or less, right? Not very much there. So I think as well, if I can pivot to these productive guys, if I'm competing, I would also be okay with pivoting to Purdy or Lawrence if I wasn't competing, if I could, just because I think it's safer. Otherwise, I'm very happy to pick. So if you're in this range, you need a quarterback. I think, David, you brought up that great point. Just if you can pivot to veteran proven production, I'm happy to do so as well. I think the wide receivers are possibly a more interesting conversation. I'm just going to read the keep trade cut ranks here again. We have for the wide receivers Drake London at wide receiver 11, Tyreek Hill wide receiver 12, Rome Odunze wide receiver 13, Jalen Waddle 14, Ayuk 15. It's approximately very similar with sleeper ADP. I'll just fire off quick. We have Waddle, Ayuk, Odunze, London, and Pittman from 12 to 16. So Odunze is one lower in sleeper, so the opposite. We're seeing people reaching less.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is probably a fair spot for Rome. This is a really tough spot to rank wide receivers in general. Some of these guys probably priced at their ceiling, to be honest. I don't really love to have players on my roster that are priced at their ceiling. Waddle, Ayuk, if their situations change, fine, yeah. Same with Pittman. I think London, I understand the hype and all. He's a great receiver. We finally have a quarterback there. He hasn't put up a wide receiver one season. If I'm competing, I want Hill in this group. If I'm rebuilding or pushing towards competing but not there yet, I probably want Rome. But yeah, I mean, this whole grouping of wide receivers gets real muddy real quick once you start getting past the elite tier.
Yeah, I think I lean a little bit of an opposite direction with I think I would probably prefer just the situation combined with what I believe is the talent and profile, even with a little bit more age of it. Ayuk, a Waddle, a London over a Dunze. I'm trying to keep some exposure to a Dunze. I have a handful of shares because I feel like there's a chance that I'm wrong. But I think we already are seeing too, like just these keep trade cut rankings where you just have to click yes or no versus the sleeper rankings where you have to actually commit to a player on your team. We're seeing a discrepancy in the opposite direction. And I think when we see that, I think we see just a little bit more hesitancy. However, one thing I will say, just anecdotally, is in this tier of players, I definitely have seen Rome going at the 5, 6. I haven't seen him going at the 7, 8 in my personal leagues. So I think in non-starter drafts, but rookie drafts, he's holding value for sure.
Yeah, I agree with that. I've even traded up for him in a couple spots. That's just where where I needed a wide receiver. It's kind of specific to that draft.
He is very good at football. I am hoping that ChatGPT is right there. I have not asked ChatGPT about tight ends yet. Actually, I didn't ask. Somebody else did. It showed up in my feed. So tight end rankings right here. We do see the same 5 both on Keep Trade Cut from ADP. That 5 is Laporta from Keep Trade Cut as 1, Bowers at 2, McBride at 3, Kincaid at 4, Pitts at 5. The only change is that with ADP, Bowers dropped to tight end 3. So he drops one spot lower as well. So I think there's a little bit more actual market fatigue or market fear. And in keep trade cut, people are like, oh, he's young, he's fun. But when you have to actually make the pick, I think we see people a little bit more hesitant. Do you kind of agree with that analysis of people being hesitant as well with Bowers?
Oh yeah, definitely. And I think in rankings, McBride should be higher than Bowers, anyways. He's shown what he can do on the field. He's still young. He's in a good situation. I understand the Bowers hype and all, but I even hesitate to put him above Kincaid. And if I'm competing, I'm definitely trying to pivot to, Andrews plus or Kelsey plus or something like that. If I can get one of these young stud tight ends we know, that's great. I don't think Bowers for Laporta is really something the Laporta manager's often willing to entertain, at least not without a bigger plus than I'm willing to give.
Yeah, I would need a plus to pivot off of those top two guys, and that plus would be approaching a first round pick in most formats. And I certainly wouldn't pay that, but I would ask for that.
I think that's totally fair, and I agree.
Now that we've looked a little bit at just like where these players are valued by the community, what are some moves that are getting done?
Yeah, so this is one you made, Justin. Start 9, 1.5 tight end premium. You traded Malik Neighbors and Deshaun Watson for 106 and Dak Prescott. If I have this correct, the 106 was on the clock and Neighbors was already drafted.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're looking on YouTube, sorry, I am not very good at typing today. However, so there's a couple typos. That's why he struggled through that one on me, not him. I'd already drafted Neighbors. I didn't need a second. I don't need both of these quarterbacks, but for me, the kind of the value is there to tier down. When I'm looking at this, I view Drake May as close enough to that same tier as Neighbors, although I certainly 100% prefer having Neighbors. But then the ability to tier from Deshaun to Dak, just be able to capitalize on the hype all over the place, right? We've seen May sliding in our own leagues to the 107 towards the 108. We've seen all over Twitter people posting receipts of getting May 107, 108, 109, even in the super flex perhaps, which is to us like kind of absurd. Like we believed in this guy. He went approximately where we thought he would. He went to a landing spot where a quarterback had to go to, and they took some weapons. So
Yeah, I kind of like this deal too. I'm a little on the fence, but I mean, going from Watson to Dak is just a home run. Even if you don't need him, the value there, it's almost impossible to sell Deshaun Watson. I took over an orphan with him, and I just can't get rid of him for anything near fair. Going from someone who's not very liquid to a quarterback that will be in demand once point season starts, I think that was a very good move there.
yeah, I was excited to get off of Watson. That was a big motivator for me. The other deal I've made after the draft here as well, start 9, full PPR, zero point 0.5 points for any first down, including quarterbacks, -1 for sack. I traded JJ at a 25 third for Jalen Waddle. Little context, I did not need quarterback. Have Love, have Murray, have Deshaun Watson as my QB3. I mind him a lot less as my QB3 because he's just there to fill in for bye weeks and injuries. And I needed additional wide receiver help. So JJ at the 108 was able to flip him and a little plus for Waddle because the other team knew I needed to get out of quarterback. A little cross positional here, but is this a deal? Did I mess up, David? I don't know if I asked you about this one yet.
Yeah, I'm okay with it, especially with your quarterback room as is. I think it's fair value when you look at it on paper. And so if it makes sense for your roster, why not do it? I also like that he squeezed you for that third though. Isn't this was this your QB horde?
I have assets to spare.
Yeah, and I'm sure the league is tired of buying quarterbacks off of you. So
Yeah, I didn't want to have to hold him through the summer, so honestly feel like I'm paying a little bit of a tax perhaps here. Not a big one. JJ for Waddle's pretty even. Paying a third to not have to worry about the stress of continuing to get off of the QB horde when I've already built most of the value, I think is just fine process for me.
yeah, I totally agree with you there.
So now we're going to move into our regular kind of rapid fire trade segment. So David and I are just going to go back and forth reading off some trades from Dynasty Daddy, dynasty-daddy.com. Great resource. We'll link it in the description below. Hope I don't have too many typos in the banners that I made. So starting right off here, David, at a start 11, are we looking to go Drake May or Tua? Obviously, you can talk competing, non-competing real quick.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm competing, I'll think about Tua here. If I'm being honest, I like Tua. I just don't feel like the market likes Tua that much. I think they're afraid of him. And I do like Drake May as well. So I think even if I'm competing, I'm probably going to go Drake May. If I feel like quarterback production is the only thing holding me back, maybe I'll go with Tua because I do expect him to put up pretty good numbers. But I'm just a little wary of how the market views him. And for you, Justin, start 10, Drake May or Will Levis in a 26 first.
It's very hard to see going the Levis package. I consider that side if I'm drafting Drake May to be my QB3 and the team with the 26 first is aging out. I'd consider the package. I might still probably be looking for a second on top. Just in a vacuum, Levis's numbers against pressure, they scare me. So I'm potentially getting just a 26 first a year from now unless I make trades with Levis between now and later. So in a vacuum, definitely going to go Drake May. David, for you, start 11, two tight end premium package deal. We have JJ on one side, or Ben Sinnott, Jonathan Brooks, and Jaden Reed. So kind of an overwhelming package on the other side in step 11.
When you really look at it, it's paying a lot to get JJ here. I mean, Jonathan Brooks was somewhere between the 110 and the 112 probably, based on the drafts that I've done. Jaden Reed's a pretty good receiver. Ben Sinnott's mid-late second, maybe early third if your draft was afraid of him for some reason. I feel like you could have done more here to get more from your quarterback, maybe even kept Reed and traded Sinnott Brooks for something else. If you've barked up all the trees and you've tried to get, what a different quarterback, and this is the best you got on the table, you need a quarterback. I could see doing it, but I'm going to lean the package unless you're really desperate. All right, start 10, Brandon Ayuk and Daniel Jones or JJ McCarthy.
This one's really interesting. If I had Drew Lock, I would probably smash the Brandon Ayuk Daniel Jones side if I'm competing. I don't know. It's very close. If a quarterback that can be my quarterback of the future for my dynasty roster, I probably lean towards staying on that JJ side. Again, very close. I don't really value Daniel Jones in this deal. Obviously, he has some value. Seen him go for a second recently. He's here just to get access to JJ. He's like a throw in, like, I need to give you a quarterback back piece. So I kind of view this as JJ versus Ayuk. So if I need wide receiver more than I need quarterback, if this is my QB3, I think I take the package again. Otherwise, I might be staying at JJ. Now, David, start 10. Moving on to wide receivers, 1.5 tight end premium. Jermaine Burton, a 25 second and a 25 first. Since we don't know, this is a league we can't see the context of, we're assuming both of those are just random, truly random. Or Rome Odunze.
Yeah, if they're truly random picks, I'm going to stick with Rome here. I don't think Burton provides me enough in a start 10 to where I can bet on him to fill in my roster spot there. If I think this first has a pretty good chance of missing the playoffs, I'll think about it pretty strongly. But it's got to be a good first for me to think about it. Rome's a great prospect. He's going, 106 ish in most drafts. So if that 25 first isn't going to beat it, I don't care enough about Burton or the extra second to make that bet.
Yeah, this is the type of bet you want to make if you vet that first. Last year, same pick slot range 106. I traded JSN for a first, second, third, and fourth. The first was a 25 first. And that ended up turning into the 104. So, like, if you do your research and you know what you're getting into, but you have to, don't be gambling, right? I was pretty much certain that team was not going to make the playoffs. Don't gamble on they need something to go wrong to make the playoffs. Gamble on it. They need something to go. They need to pick up Puka Nakua and draft Tank Dell this year in the third and fourth round or fourth and round of waivers to make the playoffs. That's the team you want to bet against, is the team that needs to get the outliers. So great point. If it's truly random, I don't think I'm going to do it. But if you vet it like we're talking about, and we'll probably do a walkthrough episode at some point this off season. So make sure to subscribe for when we do that, where we'll walk through how do we evaluate if a team is going to drop off the cliff as well, walking through Dynasty Daddy roster.
All right, a little more intriguing of a package here, I think. We got a start 10, half PPR, one tight end premium, Roma Dunze or Nico Collins in a 25 second.
I'm not going to lie, I'm a little bit down on both of these guys. I like them because they're valuable. I like Rome because he's still very valuable right now. His production scares me a little bit. I like Nico because I think he still holds more value than people are scared about his production, but I think people still really like him because of just how amazing his metrics were last year. Yeah, I'm probably going to go Rome at this point because I think I can do more with that. Nico, not everybody wants a Nico. He doesn't fit the timeline necessarily of a rebuilding team just because people are worried about the contract situation. I guess I kind of view Nico as more valued around that 109 at this point. I traded Nico for a 109 There was some fab involved, but it was almost straight up. I wouldn't take the 109 and the 25 second for Rome in a start 10. The half PPR does make this slightly more interesting because of how boom bust Nico is. I was listening to the Ballers. I don't remember if it was Dynasty or regular show, where they said he had 6 tight end 1 weeks last year and no tight end 2 weeks. So he's going to provide you a lot of upside in that half PPR, but I still am going to go Rome. So we're both picking Rome over packages. Now we're going to look at the tight end in this tier. Start 10, no tight end premium, Bowers or Worthy and Pearsall, David.
No tight end premium. I think I'll go the package, honestly. If I need a difference maker at tight end, maybe I'll think about staying. I'd rather have something in the future than Pearsall in this deal. But I like Pearsall as a prospect, and I think Worthy is close enough to Bowers in value that I'm willing to take that package. Yeah, like I said, though, I'd try to get something other than Pearsall, like a future pick or something if I can. So start 10, 1.5 tight end premium, Michael Pittman or Brock Bowers in a second.
I think I'm going to take Bowers and the second. This is along that same line. I think Pittman is probably worth somewhere around this value. Like, I think it's pretty fair. 1.5 tight end premium Bowers isn't as much of a potential tight ends or not as much of a difference maker with a 1.5 compared to the higher numbers. Just if you look at Warp, Scott Connor does some great work on that. I think the second throws me over. If you ask me to go Michael Pittman or Brock Bowers, I think I might just flip a coin. All right, and I'm going to spring on you, David, a little game here. I'm just going to ask, can you give me, I think for last year you might do pretty well, who went in that 105 to 108 range last year, just to put a little bit of historical perspective on these picks. Obviously, every year has different tiers, but it's still interesting to look.
Sure, yeah, we probably have one of Stroud or Bryce. JSN's in that range. Gibbs probably falls in that range. And then probably Addison at the back end would be my guess.
Okay, so I'm going off of DLF ADP for all of these, just the easiest place for us to pull historical data. And last year, we saw Gibbs, JSN, Addison. You have 3 of those
That makes
names.
sense.
So 108, QJ.
Yeah, that makes sense. The first 4 players only add to 4, not 5. So
It's amazing how numbers always work like that. 2022, I want to stress into your brain, David. I know you've been sick, but think back a little bit. Can you take some guesses on who was in that tier there?
Who was even in that class?
Some of your Ohio State wide receivers were in the class. We had Brees Hall.
They were both in that. London and Hall went like first 2 picks, I think. That was the year we didn't have any quarterbacks, right?
Mm-hmm. Well,
yeah, well, we didn't have any quarterbacks. Sky Moore, maybe, right? Wasn't he there?
That's a good guess. He was at the 109 or 110.
Christian Watson, perhaps.
Also, just beyond it, we had also
Jameson. Yikes.
Traylon Burks, Jamison Williams, and somehow this was not rookie draft ADP. This was startup ADP from DLF, but Pickett was the 102 for startup ADP. If that's translated to rookie, he was the second in startups. Because people are QB hungry. That pick did not age well. Probably we would all agree a better draft than the last 2, at least at the time. 2021 draft class. Again, there were 5 first-round quarterbacks, so we're going to see some. Do you have any guesses here? This one's difficult. I mean,
your top 4 probably Trey Lance was in there. Lawrence, Chase, I believe, and Pitts, right? So like Waddle, possibly. If Fields should have gone higher, but he might. I think he slipped a little. Travis Etienne probably. Maybe Javante.
We actually have a couple names that you mentioned there that you thought went a little bit higher, went in this range. Pitts and Chase, Javante, and sexy old Zach Wilson. That's a name that didn't age well. So I think we kind of in all of these, we see a couple of years out, we're going to usually see a couple of misses in this range, but we're always going to see a couple misses in most ranges. Rookie draft perspective on where players that we see in this range, again, tiers are different every year, have been. I also just wanted to put David on the spot. Now that we've looked at so much of this, we've looked at a lot of trades. Let's talk a little bit of actionable strategy for our listeners. Are you willing to tier down from this range, the 105, 108, to the 109 or 110 range for the 203 being added on? We're just going to say in a 11, 1.75 tight end premium because that's kind of our standard format here.
I don't think that's going to move me, to be honest. And maybe if I'm at 108 and I missed out on the guys that I was looking at, I'd probably move back a spot or two for that. But especially if I'm at 105, 106, and I can get Drake May, Odunze, or in a premium Brock Bowers if that's what my roster needs. I might do it from JJ just because I'm not quite as high on him, but that spot is really good. So if I'm sitting there and I do need a quarterback, I'm not going to do it. Yeah, I'd probably stay for either of those seconds. I do like the 203 though; it's in a pretty good range, so I can see moving down if your roster just needs assets.
Yeah, I think it's a fair trade as well. That's probably like a Trey Benson. Maybe you'll see Keon Coleman slide that far, or Michael Penix type of player, somewhere in that range, depending on what you're. I think I would rather look to pivot with the pick in a different direction, kind of like you were alluding to. Like I traded the 108 as JJ for Jalen Waddle. I think I'd rather go with that type of proven direction than the upside of the 108 and the unknown of the two, or the one upside of the 109 and the unknown of the 203 in a vacuum. Fair gamble. And if you end up getting a player that you really like at the 203, you feel great about it. If you don't, I mean, you could end up getting stuck with a guy you really don't like because that's maybe the end of a tier for some players, but I think that's closer to a different start, closer to the start of a different tier for us here. You can watch our 109 to 201 tier video in the description below.
So, question for you then: in non-tight end premium, do you still view Bowers with this tier, or do you think he's maybe a little closer to the back tier of the first round?
In non-tight end premium, he kind of mixes in Brooks. If you need running back, I can definitely understand taking Brooks over Bowers. And I'm a Worthy stan. I could see taking Worthy over Bowers as well. I think long term, Bowers is probably a safer bet than Worthy to eventually like curve into form. I think that this back end tier, something that I kind of view the 109 through this range as, that I think is a logical fallacy for me, is that I view these guys as potentially better assets for a competing team than some of the players in this tier we're talking about. Like I think of Lad McConkey as potentially a better performing wide receiver than Rome. I think the same way about Xavier Worthy. Some credence to that, I think, just from an opportunity standpoint, of course, at least for Lad. But Xavier Worthy also has some mouths to feed in that offense. I mean, if you look at Rashee Rice and Travis Kelce as the wide receiver 1 and 2, obviously Kelsey's not a wide receiver, but so when I walk through that type of thought process about like this type of tier and those players below it, I'm so excited about them because they're such a good value in that price range, but they're not necessarily as sure as I am hopeful about them. I think I'm very hopeful about them. It excites me. It wants me to elevate the pick. But when I walk through that thought process, I think Brooks is the only player in a non-tight end premium that I feel comfortable saying team need dependent, okay to say he should be 108 over Bowers potentially. What are your thoughts?
Well said. I think I agree with most of what you said there. I do still have Bowers in that tier, just talent wise, but it's not as strong. Like you said, if my roster dictates that I should go in a different direction, then I probably will. But like we've been talking about through this whole video, to me that other direction, if I'm competing, is looking for a proven veteran, not necessarily trading back and trying to hope on rookie production from a different rookie.
And every time we've seen in our leagues Bowers fall, we have seen people making trades for him. Even in a non-tight end premium, we saw people offering multiple assets that are valuable to try to get in. We saw bidding wars trying to get in to get Bowers in non-tight end premium leagues where he fell to like the 109, 110, 111. So people are interested. I think he has hype. He has some liquidity as well. So I see the value there. Speaking of value, different formats in a 10 team. So we only need to start 20 quarterbacks. Are these quarterbacks in this tier, or do you think in a 10 team, do you view them still in this tier, or do they kind of slide back into the next tier of players a little bit more?
Yeah, I'll start by saying I don't play a ton of 10 team. So this is based on what I hear from others that do. In a 10 team, you really got to devalue quarterback a little bit, not like a one quarterback or anything by any means. But like you said, you only need to start 20. Most everybody's going to have three quarterbacks and maybe four. So you're looking for the guys with the real upside. And I think Drake May still provides that with the rushing ability that he has. I mean, JJ's got great surrounding cast, but I don't view him as a guy that's going to be a top five kind of quarterback. And I don't necessarily think Drake May will hit that outcome, but I think it exists for him. I'm going to devalue them both a little bit, but I think I would consider drafting these guys over JJ. I'm still probably taking Drake May over, Worthy and Brooks types.
Yeah, I think as well, Drake May, I keep elevated. I think I'm more likely to start 10 to take Bowers and Rome over both of those quarterbacks. I could definitely see those guys going 5 and 6 in my rankings in a start 10. Probably Drake May 7. And then at 8, this pick's on the clock, or this pick's on the trade block, guys. Come at it. If I need a running back, I could definitely see myself being more interested in Brooks. If I need a wide receiver, probably first trying to pivot into that range of players. The ones, if you go back on the timestamp to the keep trade cut wide receiver rankings from earlier in the video range, I'd be interested in trying to pivot to that. I think you could. I think you could try to go the direction of a Waddle, an IU. If you added a little bit to get a London, add a little bit to get an Olave type of guy. I think one big takeaway David and I have hammered throughout, David more than me, pivot to the proven production if you're competing, even if you're not competing, pivoting to young proven production if they're young, right? 23 to 24-year-old wide receivers that maybe have a little bit of the shine off of their name at this time of year.
All right. And our last question we're going to talk about here. Do you think that Rome will still be the wide receiver 3 value wise from this class after the season?
I really messed up the show sheet because I wanted to ask you that. I don't want to be the first one to answer this question. No, I'm just kidding. It's a tough question, man. I wanted to talk about this because obviously, right, we're not being novel here. In our very first instant reaction video, of course, we compared Rome to like kind of the JSN situation. You've heard everybody compare it and contrast it. What's the same? What's the difference? But if a wide receiver does not produce and he doesn't produce and Neighbors and Marr produce and one other first round or Lad McConkey, and I'm not saying he doesn't produce, but if he just produces okay, 700 yards, 5 or 6 touchdowns, decent yards per route run, he shows, he flashes, but somebody else comes out with 1,008, whether it's Worthy or it's McConkey or it's somehow like Get manages to do it, BTJ manages to do it. I think it's very easy to see one of those other guys coming into the wide receiver 3 range. So what that tells me personally is if I believe in him, I'm very interested in buying throughout the season, buying a dip. What are your thoughts on where he's going to end up being, David?
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to give me the field versus Rome for wide receiver 3, I'll take it, obviously, just because the odds. But if you're going to make me pick a name, I'm still going to say Rome. I understand he's in a tough room with a rookie quarterback, albeit a generational talent. Probably more likely than not, somebody passes him in value, even if it's only for, a few months in the offseason or until we get into the season again next year when he's the wide receiver 1 on that team. He's the third best, arguably the best wide receiver prospect in the class. And it's not really close after the top 3. And so I'm going to stick to the evaluation there of the prospect. I think he's still wide receiver 3 after this year.
I'm going to go off script just a little bit here because I always like to hijack this show just to ask for trade advice. In a start 11, what are you willing to add to Rome if you want to target AJ Brown specifically on a competing team where you feel like you want that more of that hammer type production? Asking for a friend who is me.
I mean, it depends on how many assets I have to spare. I don't I, I don't think I can add a future first, but if it's me and I'm competing and it's probably a late first, I think I could probably do Roman a first for AJ Brown and maybe a second or a third or a handcuff running back that might give me a spike week or two. Most I could consider. And it couldn't be somebody else's first. That could be a good first.
All right. That's kind of the thought process I was going for, is adding my first, getting back a second is something I could possibly stomach, but I'm not excited about doing, but I would not mind a championship. So
yeah, I don't mind that if you're competing.
All right. Thanks for the advice for me. Make sure to shoot your trade questions in the sections below as well. We're happy to always get together, discuss, and then get back to you with an answer. Make sure to give us some context as well, the number of starters in the league, any scoring format tweaks, and the more context you can give us, the better for players, the quarterbacks, wide receivers, running backs, tight ends that matter, the ones you're starting, any ones you think have trade value. If your rookie draft hasn't taken place, what picks you have, what picks you have in the future. As much as you give us, we'll just give you a better answer. So don't be afraid to write us an essay. We love it. We are going to hop right in and just quick bang out who we are going to take with these picks. At the 105 and 106, we really struggled to pick between Rome and Maye. We both seem a lot of Odunze going at the 105. In fact, David, I believe you picked him there a few times.
I'd have to check through, but I think it's twice. And I'll be honest, that's who I have here for most of my teams, but most of my teams have a solid quarterback room because I really prioritize that. If you need a quarterback, take me here for sure, and I'm comfortable with that. But if you're not in need of a quarterback, I think I would go Odunze.
I definitely lean the same way. And in fact, I've seen quarterback needy teams, guys who have 1.5 starters, take Odunze as well. I think he has more flexibility than Maye does because everybody needs young stud wide receivers, or everybody wants them, but not everybody needs another quarterback. I think for that reason, this is kind of a process you've heard me walk through all offseason of the flexibility of the wide receivers. So if we can't do something else to keep this asset flexible by rolling back to the 109 and a 25 first or something like that, if I don't love this and I can't keep flexibility with something like that, with that caveat of if you need quarterback, we would not be taking Rome at the 105. We'd probably be taking instead.
Well, Drake Maye.
We're going to take at the 106. This ADP here on Sleeper cannot be true. Is Drake Maye truly going after Jonathan Brooks, McCarthy, and Xavier Worthy?
No way. Yeah, that can't be right. There has to be something funny going on there. 107 is kind of obvious for me too, especially in our format. If you have Brock Bowers, in a 175 tight end premium fall due at the 7th pick, I'm running that card up. I think if you need a tight end, you could even consider him as high as the 105. But I do understand the hesitancy of a tight end, and I think that's why we see Odunze and Maye going above him.
Not as great of a trade piece, with the exception of last year's production from year one tight ends. It's not something historically we see a lot of fantasy production for these guys the first year, so it's very easy to understand being hesitant on him. But with any sort of meaningful premium at the 107, you are ecstatic to be taking him here. We are going to take JJ McCarthy. I actually created this idea for this video because I wanted to challenge, should we still view this as the tier? Everything we've been seeing and thinking, I wanted to go through this exercise and evaluate, is this still who we view to be the tier and why, and actually justify the thought process? Because I wasn't sure what the answer would be when we started making this show sheet and coming together, but I think we both all agree that the value of him and his situation is something you can't pass up at the 108. So David, did we just make this whole video to decide that the tier is still the same?
Yeah, but sometimes you need to be reassured that what you thought before is still the same. We see a lot of changing. We saw some overreactions in several drafts. When you really take a step back, like I said at the top, 3 of these 4 guys went to the team that they were probably most, had the highest odds to go to. So I don't see a reason to adjust your pre-draft rankings, even if you love Worthy at Kansas City or something. We talked about the top 8 as the top 8 for quite a while, and everybody knows who they are. So even just from a value perspective, I think it's kind of a mistake to reach in this range.
Yeah, I think that's a very concise way to wrap that up, David. I can't say that I can add anything of value to what you said, so I guess I will just say, from all of us here at Dino Construction Podcast, thank you so much for joining us for another episode. We hope you found this as useful for you as it was for us. Please make sure to like and subscribe wherever you view, because although we are starting to transition away from draft-related content, we are excited to get into more strategy-related content, market-related content, how to navigate your leagues. And we want to make sure to help you out and get information from you in the comments below on what episodes you want to hear, what topics you want to hear about as well. So from all of us here at Dino Construction, until next time.